morning sun rose over the vast plain, lighting up the rows of soldiers waiting for the battle to begin. Dust and smoke covered the land from previous skirmishes, and the air was heavy with the sound of marching boots and clanging armor. Jackson Reed stood at the edge of the army, his eyes scanning the distant hills where the enemy had gathered. His face was calm, but inside, his mind was already moving faster than anyone else. Queen Elizabeth Mason rode along the front line, her horse moving steadily as she watched her soldiers prepare. She was a strong woman, tall and commanding, and every soldier in her army respected her. She knew that today would be a hard fight. The enemy had more troops, more weapons, and they believed they could crush her army without effort. She had confidence in her people, but even she could not ignore the overwhelming numbers on the horizon. Jackson stepped forward as she approached. "Queen Mason, the scouts report heavy movement on the left flank," he said quietly. His voice carried authority without needing to shout. He had earned his place among the soldiers, not by rank, but by his skill and courage. "I see it," the Queen said, nodding. "You will take the men you trust and hold that side, and keep them from breaking our line." Jackson glanced at Anna Parker and Luke Bennett, two of his closest allies. Anna was an archer, her aim deadly, and Luke was a sharpshooter who never missed his target. Together, they formed a small unit that could change the course of the battle if used wisely. The ground shook as the enemy army began to move forward. Their banners flew high, and their soldiers shouted in unison. Jackson felt the tension in the air, but he did not flinch. He signaled his group to take positions along the ridge where they could see the enemy advance and strike when the moment was right. The first clash came quickly. The enemy sent forward a group of soldiers to test the defenses. Jackson met them with precision and force. He moved faster than they expected, cutting through their lines and forcing them back. Anna fired arrow after arrow, picking off anyone who tried to get close, while Luke covered their flanks with his rifle. The small group held strong, buying time for the Queen's main army to position themselves. As the sun climbed higher, the battle grew louder. The clash of steel, the screams of men, and the thunder of cannons filled the air. Jackson never stopped moving. Every step he took was calculated. Every strike he made was deadly. Soldiers began to notice his actions, whispering among themselves. One man had changed the flow of the fight already. Queen Mason watched from her horse. She felt a surge of hope. She had chosen Jackson for his bravery, but even she could not have predicted how much of a difference he would make. She shouted orders to her commanders, coordinating attacks that pushed the enemy back slowly. Each movement was supported by Jackson and his small unit, who struck at the enemy at the perfect moment. By midday, the first wave of the enemy had been repelled. Jackson stood atop the ridge, catching his breath, but ready for what came next. Anna and Luke were beside him, their faces showing a mix of exhaustion and determination. The Queen rode up to them, her voice firm but proud. "You have done well. This is only the beginning, but your actions today have kept our army strong." Jackson nodded, looking out at the battlefield. Thousands of enemy soldiers still waited. He knew that the coming hours would be harder, that the fight was far from over, but he also knew that he could face them, and with the Queen and his allies, they had a chance to survive and win. The plain was quiet for a moment, as both sides regrouped. Jackson clenched his fists and tightened his grip on his sword. The battle of two armies had begun, and the man who could crush thousands was ready to show his strength. The battlefield was alive with noise. Soldiers shouted orders, and the clash of swords echoed across the plain. Smoke rose from burning equipment, and the ground was torn by cannon fire. Jackson Reed moved with precision, leading his small unit toward the enemy's center. Every step was careful, every move planned. He had learned to read the battlefield, and nothing escaped his notice. Anna Parker ran beside him, her bow ready. She scanned the enemy lines, picking targets with deadly accuracy. Arrows flew, striking officers and soldiers who tried to advance. Luke Bennett followed closely, his rifle cutting down anyone who dared to flank them. Together, the three of them were unstoppable. The enemy was larger, but their size could not match skill and strategy. Jackson spotted a weak point in their formation. He signaled to Anna and Luke, and they moved swiftly. Jackson charged forward, breaking through the first row of enemy soldiers. His sword cut cleanly, and he moved like a shadow, impossible to catch. Soldiers tried to stop him, but they fell one by one. Queen Elizabeth Mason watched from her horse, shouting commands to her commanders. Her army followed the rhythm of Jackson's strikes, moving in ways that maximized their strength. She trusted him more than anyone. The enemy began to falter, confused by the speed and precision of one man against their many. In the middle of the chaos, a group of enemy soldiers surrounded Anna. Jackson noticed immediately. He ran to her side, fighting with unmatched skill. Moved between them, striking quickly and efficiently. Anna fired arrows while ducking behind him, picking off the remaining soldiers. When the fight ended, the enemy lay defeated, and Jackson barely paused before turning to the next threat. The enemy general, Robert Hawkins, had expected to crush the smaller army with ease. He now realized his mistake. Jackson Reed was no ordinary man. Every attack he made caused fear to spread among the enemy soldiers. Hawkins tried to regroup his men, but Jackson's presence cut through their lines like a storm. As the battle continued, Jackson noticed the enemy preparing a charge on the left flank. He sprinted toward them, moving faster than anyone could follow. His sword swung in wide arcs, breaking through the enemy ranks. Soldiers screamed and ran, unable to stand against his skill. Anna and Luke followed, their attacks precise and deadly. The Queen's army began to gain ground. They pushed the enemy back step by step. Jackson's small unit became the center of their advance, the point that broke the enemy morale. Every soldier in the enemy army saw him and feared him. Jackson did not stop. He could not stop while the battle was still alive. By evening, the enemy lines had been fractured. Some soldiers surrendered, others fled into the hills. Jackson stood on the battlefield, bloodied but unbowed. Anna and Luke were beside him, breathing heavily but ready to continue. The Queen approached them, her eyes filled with respect and pride. "You have done more than any of us imagined," she said. "Your actions have given us the advantage we needed." Jackson nodded, looking at the remaining enemy forces. He knew this was only the first major clash. The enemy would regroup and strike again. But today, one man had changed the course of the battle. His skill, courage, and leadership had proven that even thousands of soldiers could fall before the right strategy and the right heart. The sun began to set over the battlefield. Smoke rose in long columns, and the cries of the wounded echoed in the distance. Jackson looked at his queen and his friends. They had won a hard fight today, but the war was far from over. He clenched his sword, ready for whatever came next. The battle was just beginning, and Jackson Reed was ready to face it head-on. The night fell over the battlefield, and the fires from the day cast long shadows over the broken ground. Jackson Reed moved quietly through the smoke and rubble, alert to every sound. The enemy was regrouping, and he knew that they would try a surprise attack on Queen Elizabeth Mason's army. He could not allow that to happen. Anna Parker and Luke Bennett followed him closely. They trusted his instincts and knew that his skill could make a difference. Jackson stopped at a hill that overlooked a section of the enemy camp. Soldiers moved in tight groups, setting up tents and gathering supplies. He counted officers and noticed the layout. Something about it told him the enemy had a hidden battalion ready to flank the Queen's army. "They are preparing to strike our left side," he said quietly. "We cannot wait for them to attack. We have to act first." Anna nodded, readying her bow. Luke checked his rifle. Together, they formed a small strike team, fast and deadly. Jackson led them down the hill, moving silently through the dark. Every step was careful, avoiding patrols and traps. The enemy did not notice them until it was too late. Jackson struck first, cutting down the sentries with precision. Anna fired arrows at anyone trying to escape. Luke took out officers with single, perfect shots. They moved through the camp like shadows, leaving chaos in their wake. The hidden battalion was caught completely off guard. The enemy tried to regroup, but Jackson was relentless. He moved through their lines, breaking their formation and cutting off escape routes. Soldiers fell before him, and the enemy officers could not stop the tide of destruction. Anna and Luke were beside him, striking with deadly accuracy. Every attack was coordinated, every movement calculated. Jackson reached the center of the enemy camp, where the main officers were gathered. He swung his sword with speed and force, striking down those who tried to command their men. Fear spread quickly through the enemy ranks. Soldiers dropped their weapons and ran, not knowing what to do. From the hill, Queen Elizabeth Mason saw the movement in the enemy camp. She realized that Jackson had struck at the right moment. His actions had saved her army from a deadly flank attack. She ordered her commanders to press forward while the enemy was in disarray. By dawn, The enemy camp was in ruins. Jackson stood among the scattered soldiers, his sword dripping with blood, but his stance unshaken. Anna and Luke were beside him, exhausted but victorious. They had stopped a hidden battalion and prevented a major disaster for their army. The Queen rode up to them, her face showing relief and pride. "You have done the impossible," she said. "Your actions have saved many lives and kept our army strong. The enemy will not forget this night." Jackson nodded, looking at the horizon. The enemy was still out there, and the war was far from over. But he had shown that a small group of humans, led by skill and courage, could change the course of battle. Anna and Luke smiled, knowing they had been part of something extraordinary. The battlefield was quiet now, but the fires burned bright, casting long shadows across the plain. Jackson looked at his queen and friends, ready for the next fight. The enemy would regroup, but they would never be prepared for what Jackson Reed could do. The night had proved one thing. Even thousands of soldiers could fall before the strength, skill, and courage of one man and his allies. The sun rose over the battlefield, casting light on the two massive armies facing each other. Dust swirled across the plain as soldiers tightened their armor and checked their weapons. Jackson Reed stood at the front, his eyes focused on the enemy. He had faced them before and knew their tactics, but this battle would decide the fate of Queen Elizabeth Mason's army. Anna Parker stood beside him, her bow ready. Luke Bennett adjusted his rifle, scanning for movement. They knew Jackson's skill could turn the fight, but they also knew it would not be easy. Thousands of enemy soldiers waited, confident that they could crush the smaller army.
Ow.
The first wave of attack came swiftly. Soldiers ran across the plain, shields and swords raised. Jackson moved like lightning, cutting through the enemy ranks. His sword struck with precision and speed. Anna fired arrows, each one finding its mark. Luke covered their sides, taking down anyone who tried to flank them. The enemy stumbled, unable to respond to the speed and skill of the small team. Queen Mason rode along the front line, shouting commands. Her voice carried authority, and her soldiers followed without question. She directed her forces to exploit the gaps Jackson created. The combination of strategy and skill pushed the enemy back step by step. Jackson noticed a group of enemy officers trying to organize a counterattack. He charged through them, striking them down before they could give orders. Fear spread quickly among the enemy ranks. The battle grew more intense. Soldiers clashed with swords and cannon fire shook the ground. Jackson fought in the center, moving through the enemy like a force of nature. He was everywhere at once, striking, defending, and leading. Anna and Luke were constantly by his side, their attacks precise and deadly. Each enemy soldier who faced them fell quickly, and the army began to lose cohesion. Jackson saw the enemy general, Robert Hawkins, trying to rally his troops. He pushed forward, determined to face the general directly. The clash was fierce, but Jackson's skill and speed overpowered him. Hawkins fell, and the enemy soldiers hesitated. Their morale broke as they saw their leader defeated. Queen Mason ordered her forces to press the advantage, and her soldiers surged forward, taking control of the battlefield. The enemy began to retreat, but Jackson did not stop. He led small groups to cut off escape routes, ensuring that as few as possible could regroup. Anna and Luke worked with him, coordinating attacks to trap enemy soldiers. The battlefield was filled with chaos, but the Queen's army remained organized, guided by Jackson's actions. By midday, the enemy was scattered, their lines destroyed. Jackson stood in the center of the battlefield, breathing heavily but ready for the next threat. Queen Mason approached, riding through her victorious soldiers. She looked at Jackson and nodded, a silent acknowledgement of his bravery and skill. "You have done what no one else could," she said. "The army owes its victory to you." Jackson looked out over the plain. Thousands of enemy soldiers had been defeated, and the battle was won. Anna and Luke were beside him, their faces showing relief and pride. The war was not over, but this battle proved one thing. Even a small group of humans, led by courage, skill, and strategy, could defeat thousands of soldiers. The sun climbed higher, lighting up the broken battlefield. Jackson Reed, Queen Elizabeth Mason, and their allies had claimed victory. The story of one man who could crush thousands was no longer just a rumor. It was real, and it would inspire their army for the battles to come. The battlefield was quiet now, Smoke rose from broken weapons and fires still burned in small patches. Soldiers from Queen Elizabeth Mason's army moved among the wounded, helping them stand or carrying them to safety. Jackson Reed walked through the field, his sword resting on his shoulder. Anna Parker and Luke Bennett stayed close, scanning for any remaining threats. The enemy had been defeated, scattered across the plains. Jackson's actions had broken their lines and crushed their morale. Soldiers whispered his name in awe and fear. Even the Queen's commanders could not hide their respect for him. One man had changed the outcome of the battle, and everyone knew it. Queen Mason rode toward Jackson, her armor glinting in the sunlight. She dismounted and looked at him directly. "You have done more than anyone could imagine. The army owes this victory to your skill and courage," she said. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of gratitude. Jackson nodded. He had fought for the army, for the Queen, and for every soldier who trusted him. He did not seek fame, but he understood that his actions would inspire others. Anna smiled beside him, proud of what they had accomplished together. Luke adjusted his rifle, keeping watch, still alert even after the fight. Soldiers gathered around them, cheering quietly at first, then louder as more joined. They had seen what one man could do, and knew that courage and skill could overcome overwhelming numbers. The story of Jackson Reed spread quickly, and even those who had not seen him fight heard about the man who could crush thousands. Queen Mason called her commanders together. She gave orders to secure the battlefield, care for the wounded, and collect the fallen weapons. She made sure that the army stayed organized and ready. The battle was over, but the war was not finished. She wanted her army prepared for the next fight, and she knew that Jackson Reed's presence would make a difference in future battles. Jackson walked among the soldiers, helping where he could. He encouraged them, gave directions, and reminded them that strength came from unity. Anna and Luke assisted him, showing the soldiers that teamwork made them stronger. Every action he took reinforced the lesson he had proven on the battlefield. Skill, courage, and intelligence could defeat even the largest enemy. As the sun climbed higher, the Queen held a small ceremony to recognize the bravery of those who had fought bravely. Jackson, Anna, and Luke were honored first. The soldiers watched and cheered. The victory was theirs, but it was also the legacy of those who had fought with skill and heart. Jackson stood with his sword lowered, looking at the horizon. The battle had ended, but the war was ongoing. The story of one man who had crushed thousands would spread across the lands, a reminder of what humans could achieve. Anna and Luke stayed at his side, ready to face whatever came next. The battlefield became quiet, and the army began to move forward, rebuilding and preparing for new challenges. Jackson Reed, Queen Elizabeth Mason, and their allies had proven the power of courage and strength. One man had changed the course of the battle, and his legend would inspire soldiers for years to come. Humanity had shown its might, and the story of their victory would be remembered forever.